When the Earth starts acting strange, one can only wonder why. But as these happenings eventually turn deadly, we discover that maybe the Earth itself no longer wants us here. Writer GorillaOfUndeath tells us an apocalyptic tale of the day the Earth expelled us. The room was quiet as I sucked the goop from the food tube. The taste was revolting, but apparently it had all the nutrients the group needed. Not that it really mattered now. People around me sucked their own goop from their food tubes. The goop was running out along with many people's patience and civility. I guess civility was lost long ago, though. Yeah, it was lost before we even got on this thing. There's a guy sitting in the corner. Charles Crandus, I think. Crandus looks at me now with anger in his eyes. He's going to be the next problem, I can already tell. He normally got 2 food tubes per day. Now he was down to 1 due to rationing, and that pisses him off. It pisses everyone off, but there is a sense of understanding from everyone else that isn't present in him. It's only been 2 months, but we had to leave in a hurry, and we weren't prepared or trained to handle it. We barely made it out here, and now that we have, I think a lot of us wish we hadn't. After all, this place is going to be our tomb. We are just staving off the inevitable. This rocket was built to sustain 4 people, but we have 40. Or we did have 40. Some of them are gone. People do weird things when they are trying to survive. They also do weird things when they lose hope. I watch every day as Earth gets further and further away, that miserable planet that expelled us. It all started with the humming. It could be heard all over the world. It was a distinct hum that really wormed its way into your brain. A never-ending noise that you couldn't just tune out, only adjust to. It drove some people nuts. And when I say nuts, I don't mean they were slightly annoyed. No, these people went full-on mental, killing themselves or going on psychopathic rampages. It wasn't the end of the world, though. At least, not yet. The hum only severely affected a limited number of people, and the rest of us learned to live with it. Scientists were all on board to determine its origin, but there were a lot of theories and nothing really substantial ever came from it. All they could find out was that it came from somewhere deep in the earth, but they could never figure out why. The hum persisted, but eventually the next phase began to happen. Certain areas on Earth began to have reduced gravity. At first it was ever so slight. An object would fly a little bit higher or fall to the ground a little bit slower than normal. But as time passed, it became more and more severe to the point that jumping in the air would send you up nearly 20 feet. People at first thought this was fun. They made these areas landmarks to go and moon jump, as they called it. It became a social media phenomenon, and people around the world flocked there to take pictures and videos. It was all fun and games until someone had the grand idea of trying to pole vault in a very low gravity zone. They asphyxiated before they could even land back down on the ground, and it was after that authorities tried to regulate the areas, though it didn't stop most people. It wasn't just reduced gravity, though. There were areas that were affected by increased gravity. Again, this was all fun and games for many people. Another trend was born on social media that had all sorts of fitness buffs working out in these high gravity zones. I know because I was one of them. I was running around high gravity zones as there was one right near where I lived. And man, did I get a lot of likes and followers from it, as well as a great workout. It's funny now to think back to how attached I was to my phone and the constant validation it gave me. None of that really matters now. The gravity zones were mapped out by several people, but As time went on, more and more were popping up to the point that people couldn't keep up. Soon, it was difficult to fly airplanes, and after a flight crashed while flying into a high-gravity zone, there was a great scare with flying. Several of the world governments finally began to take these zones seriously, and actually gave scientists the funding they needed to properly research. Up to that point, the scientists were only hobbyists, driven by passion, but now they were called upon to find solutions. I can tell you though, they never did. And things got even worse. New York City was the first, flattened to nothing in a rapid gravity shift. It was so intense that the ground itself crumbled below the city, sinking New York into a hole and taking all its people with it. They said it was quick, that the people didn't have to suffer. The next gravity shift was in California. This time it seemed gravity inverted. People who couldn't tether themselves to something floated up and up and up until they suffocated. Millions more lost. The whole world was struck with fear, knowing that gravity could shift at any time and kill them. People stopped going to work. Businesses shut down. Religious groups popped up everywhere saying it was the end times, that Jesus was returning or some shit. But I think the earth just got tired of us, like we were a bunch of flies sitting on top of a sleeping animal. It only took so long for it to wake up and start to shake us off. Riots popped up and chaos reigned. Some of the scariest shit was stuff that people did to each other during these times. We're talking murder, rape, even cannibalism. You name some sick act and people were out there doing it. Christ, someone got a fucking video of a guy fucking a penguin as gravity inverted and he floated away with it. Another guy got caught eating a baby, and when they caught him, he said it wasn't the first. Real sick, deviant shit. Eventually, gravity calmed down after flattening 6 more large cities and some rural areas. It was always in flux after that, but not to the extreme that we had seen before. That's when the storms started popping up. It became a rarity to see the sun anymore. It was blocked by heavy clouds that hung real low to the ground. Those of us who were still left alive had to battle these raging storms. We're talking winds in excess of 200 miles per hour, cloud-to-ground lightning that happens every day, acid rain that would melt your skin until you were nothing but a skeleton. Tornadoes decimated communities. People were left huddling under trees and bridges, hoping to God that the lightning didn't hit them, or the rain wasn't that acid shit so they could have a drink. God wasn't gonna save us though. He didn't give a shit. Starvation was common. I was out there in the muck with everyone, looking for food and trying not to get swept away by roving bands of cannibals. Not like you could swing on down to the grocery store anymore, and people were desperate. I did some shit I'm not proud of, though. I watched a man carrying a loaf of bread get hit by lightning. My first instinct wasn't to go see if he was alright. I walked up to him and took the loaf of bread, leaving him in a twitching mess until he probably died. 2 of my friends asked me if I had anything to eat. I hid the bread and told them I had nothing. I ate it in secret, and they both starved to death a week later. It was at this time my small group heard about the Bildenbergs, a rich family that had hired a bunch of people to keep them safe. They lived in a bunker that sheltered them from all these storms. Word spread around the trash hole I lived in that they had funded a rocket when all of this started, and planned to leave Earth in a few weeks' time to live in space. I gathered a few people, and we were able to convince the family's hired goons to turn against them when the time came. When it was almost time for the rocket's launch date, the Earth entered a new phase of hell that is probably the most bizarre and the most cruel at the same time. Trees began to all grow a special fruit. It grew rapidly and was plentiful. The fruit was orange in color with purple spots on it. At first, people hailed it as a miracle. Manna from heaven, they said. But the people who ate that shit found out it was anything but a miracle. Within an hour, they had stomach pains. By day 3, the people who ate that fruit were nothing but a collection of pus-filled lumps that walked around spewing out sick liquids that made everyone ill. They'd wander around mindlessly attacking anyone who came near them until they were swept away in a storm or died some other way. Animals changed too from that fruit. They were violently altered into terrifying monstrosities that hunted us down unmercifully, like the animals were getting revenge on us for all those years of hunting. Deer would grow nearly 3 sizes. Antlers grew to massive proportions and became razor sharp and strong. Their bodies grew bone around them to protect them from injury. Even bullets didn't pierce it. But birds. Holy shit, fuck birds. They could hear you from 30 miles away, and before you even knew it, they'd have lifted you off the ground. You could try to shoot them, but their reflexes and eyes were enhanced to the point they could simply dodge it. And that's only if they had to. They moved so fast, only a trained marksman could have a chance of taking one down. I can't tell you how many people I saw fall to their death because of those things. I almost got used to the sickening splat of someone hitting the ground. All we could do was hope they wouldn't show up. When humans died from the fruit, they merged with the earth and became fleshy sacks that stuck out of the ground. If you went near those sacks, it meant you were dead. Those things would explode with violent force, tearing you limb from limb. And if the explosion didn't get you, then the liquids it expelled would have you suffering the same fate as those who had eaten the fruits. I'm surprised I even made it to the rocket after all this hell. I don't know what the population is anymore, but it can't be large. The small group we had made it to the launch site, and as the hired goons had promised, we turned on the rich family who thought they were going to just up and leave us here to die. We tied them up to a post. There was no need to kill them. The birds would do that. You should have heard that guy scream and scream about how he paid for this and his money and who he was. No one gave a shit. 40 of us got on that rocket. We had to leave a few behind, but what does it matter? We made it out into space, but we ran out of fuel and now we just drift. Some people killed themselves after that. Went out the airlock without a suit on and died. Maybe that was better than starvation. I'm not sure, really. I guess I'll find out soon enough. But I can buy myself some more time. Crandus doesn't deserve to eat anymore. I'll wrap my hands around his neck until he's gone. Then I'll be having 2 food tubes a day.